didn't have any warriors, and so that's why they invaded Ziklag. They're going, oh, David is gone. Let's go get his stuff. And there they went. They didn't fight against David in a fair fight. They knew they would lose, or I don't know what they were doing, but they thought if they could get an advantage, they would take it. Now, Saul had some early victories against the Amalekites. That was a good thing. But then he refused to destroy them in chapter 14, where God had said, destroy them because they are terrorists, because they don't listen to me, because they have never repented. Destroy them. Saul refused, and it was at that point that God says, I am going to take the kingdom from you. And he gives the kingdom to David, and now David defeats them. It was now David's job as future king and as soon-to-be king to defeat the Amalekites. For the first time, though, David's men questioned him. Not only is he playing this dangerous game between Achish and Saul, and not only has he lost everything, he's lost his family, he's lost his money, he's lost his possessions. Now his own men turn against him for the very first time. They want to stone him. He has reached the lowest point in his life. And what is he going to do about it? Like Saul, in chapter 28, David is surrounded by trouble. There is no hope. There is no way out. Where is he going to turn to for advice on how to handle this situation? And his behavior illustrates why he made a great king, and 28 illustrates why Saul made a horrible king. They both were anointed by God. They both were chosen by Samuel. They both had the Spirit of God in them to be king. David makes a great king. Saul makes a terrible king. One of the phrases that we read here is that David found strength in the Lord his God. Now, when we see that word Lord capitalized like that in your Bibles, they are trying to translate the word Yahweh. Now, we translate it Lord because that's what the Jews did. They never put the vowels in. They just leave the consonants, and then they would put the vowels of the word Adonai, which means Lord, in there so that they would never say that name, and they would never be tempted to say God's name, which we think is pronounced Yahweh. We're not sure because nobody's pronounced that name for thousands of years. But it's not Lord in the sense of master-slave. It is Lord in the sense of this is his relationship name. Whenever you see those capital letters like that, remember that this is God's relationship name with us. This is the name that he comes in and says, I want to be your Father. I want to be your God. I want to have a relationship with you. And David comes to God and says, I have a relationship with you. You are my God. And I know that you care for me, and I know that you love me, and I know that you will watch out for me. And so David finds strength in that God and in that relationship. There's also something strange about the verb found strength. It involves a reflexive element, which, as we all remember from our grammar days, anybody remember this from your grammar days? Reflexive is it's acting on itself. David finds strength in God because he is strengthening himself. His faith is not passive, it is active. He is doing something about it. He is choosing to rely on a reliable God. He's choosing to have faith in a faithful God. We need to have this same kind of faith. It's not just, oh, I know you're out there, God. You need to take action about that. And David took steps about this. He was a faithful man who believed in a faithful God. And we need to have both halves of those statements. Faith requires a human response, even if it's given to you by God. And Ephesians tells us that our faith is a gift from God. Even the faith that we make, even the choices that we make to follow God are a gift from God, but he requires us to make those choices and to take those steps of faith. We have to act as well as God acting in this world. And so David takes off after the Amalekites. He first calls for Abiathar. This is one of his steps of faith. this is what he is doing. He goes to the priest and says, is God going to be on my side if I take after them? And we read last week that God was strangely absent. There was no particular word from God during that whole scene that we studied last week. But now God is going to act again. And so God comes to Abiathar and says, yes, tell David to go after the Amalekites. I will help him to defeat them. And David goes. He is obedient to this. This chapter really features some of David's great character. One of the great things about him is that he is magnanimous. He is willing to share. He's willing to give. He's willing to spread the wealth out to everybody. He's not just saying, hey, God made me king, give it all to me. He's saying, let's spread it around. Let's give it to everybody. He is also understands people and he identifies with them. And we see this in a couple ways. First, after they start chasing the Amalekites, they come upon an Egyptian who has been a slave to these people, and he's gotten sick, and the Amalekites are on the run, so they just abandon him. They just turn him loose and say, we don't care about you. You know, you can die in the desert for all we care. If you can't keep up, you're dead. Well, David stops, and he takes care of him, and he feeds him. This guy is not an Israelite. He is not a high-class dude. He doesn't have a lot of money to influence anybody. He's a slave. He's an Egyptian slave. And yet David stops and takes care of him. And then he intervenes in this dispute with his followers. They have conquered the Amalekites. They've beat them back. They've gotten all of their stuff back. But some of the guys, you remember they came way from the north and had to go all the way south to get to Ziklag. And now they've been chasing the Amalekites. And some of them just couldn't keep up anymore. And so David said, that's all right. You stay with the baggage. So when they conquer the Amalekites, David's followers said, the ones who fought, said, let's not share any of this. They can have their kids back and they can have their stuff back, but they're not getting any of their other stuff. David says, no. We're going to share with everyone, whether they watched the bags or whether they fought in the war. And so David takes care of all of them. They had faced ruin. They had faced a desperate life. They had come to abandon homes, and everything that they loved had been taken care of them. David was in danger of being stoned to death, and he turns an impossible situation, and he still can be generous after that victory. And then he goes on to support the cities of Judah. Not only does he support his men, but he supports all those people who may or may not have liked him. But he gives them money as well. David takes this daring